Welcome to Marathon Champions, the podcast where running legends Benji Durden, Bill Rogers, and Ron Tabb share their timeless wisdom on marathon training and inspire listeners with their wealth of experience. These champions continue to impact the running world today.
We were a working class sport, and there's a great book out about the 1918 Boston Marathon and all the working class runners from around the country and the world who would run Boston, and some of them were literally coming in on freight trains and they were literally
Hobos.
hobos. Yeah, really. I think his last name was Kennedy. His name was Kennedy,
Yeah.
and
Bricklayer Bill.
bricklayer Bill Kennedy, who
Yeah,
won
it's a
Boston.
great book. Yeah.
And that's the
book.
story of our sport. You know, today I was looking at the Boston Globe. I'm reading about this fellow who helped the Celtics win the national NBA title. And he
Yeah.
just renewed his deal with the Celtics for $174 million. And now
Yeah.
I'm thinking, wow, what a contrast.
Well, the thing about pro sports is they're proud that their athletes make money. Our sport's ashamed that our athletes make any money. I mean, the BAA
How you're talking.
had Kipchoge in here, and they had to pay him probably $1 million, and no one knows because and then the prize money's minuscule, and they're down to giving it only to the top 10. So all the money is hidden, which is ridiculous. I mean, I think it would help at least a little bit if people knew it was at stake, you know,
I think so too.
but they don't.
It's the sport.
And I think it
would bring more attention to the sport if people were aware of what the under the table and the prize money structures and how they were designed.
I've tried to do media outlets to do an expose. I've written a few things about it, but you know, who am I? Nobody cares what I have to say. But
well, at the same time, how much information can you actually get? I mean, they don't really want people to know.
They don't. And the agents and the BAA don't want people to know. And as long as they don't want people to know, it's not going to come out. But, you know, since they're a nonprofit, a type of a nonprofit, you know, they should be showing where money goes. They have to file a Form 990.
Well, is the race itself paying, or is it the race arranging for somebody to pay so it doesn't really go through their...
Well, that's the way it used to work, Benji. The Hancock, who supported all of the invited runners.
Right.
So that they almost worked independently of the BAA.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that maybe the BAA's books wouldn't show what you're wanting it to be out there.
No, I don't think it will. It won't show it, and that's the thing. They sign personal services contracts that are, you know, that nobody knows what the athletes are being paid. So they're if we know they paid Kipchoge $1 million, just say they invite 30 athletes, and a lot of them are getting 100, 200,000. Okay, so that's the kind of money that's in the sport that no one's aware of. And they want to keep it that way. And I don't understand why. For one person, I don't understand why. I think it's silly. And I think it's just, I think an organization like a nonprofit especially should, you know, say where the money's going. But anyway, Bank of America, the new sponsor, what they want to do is they just want to expand all the charity running. And the elite race is becoming less and less important. In fact, I wouldn't be all that surprised if it just one day they just cut it down to just about nothing. But we shall see.
Good points, I think. I do think, you know, when you pick up our sports pages or on TV and everything, and now, I mean, when you take a look at the sports that we really support in a massive way, the dollars are huge. And we know that athletics is a global sport, unlike the sports somewhat in America, where these highly paid athletes are succeeding. Bob, I think we'll always have the competitive side, though, to Boston because of its history. I mean, we all have run there. We all know that. It's runners from around the world. The history of our sport is so important. And that's what we're trying to talk about a little bit in this podcast. Because we were lucky, in a certain way, to have been there in the first running boom. You know?
Yeah. But I mean, as one of the pioneers in the sport, who was pressing for prize money back in the really, crazy amateur days. I never thought that the sport would develop in this manner. I thought I thought more runners meant, that would be more competitive. I mean, overall. So back in the day when you had qualifying standards, you improved the level of the sport overall. You couldn't just run Boston. You had to run under 250 if you were an open man. Nowadays we don't have. I mean, that should be, to me, I'm going for, more excellence, especially if it's a marathon major, it should be all about the sport. Have your charity event separately, whatever you organize.
It was the
people are pretty much just buying their way into the Boston Marathon. I mean, the money's going to charity, but they're basically just buying the number.
Well, story, we could take a look at that. We should bring Jack Foltz in on our podcast as he works for Barber.
Jack and I have had this discussion. He's told me that I'm very cynical.
Well, you're not cynical. You're looking at the truth.
I think it's truth, though. I think it's the truth. And I have given money to a lot of these charity runners because they're friends of mine. And I know that they're only buying a number because they have the money and they don't necessarily have the fleet feet or the will to really train hard.
Yeah, and they try to do their best. And there's Dana-Farber, Jack's guidance. He knows training. He was triple one, and athlete. And but that's rare. Most of the organizations don't have that, but it's a great part to our sport is the fundraising. It's a way to get some focus and visibility.
But other sports fundraise, tennis fundraisers, golf, but they do charity events.
Yeah.
So they'll have a separate event. They're not going to mix up. They're not going to mix up all the amateurs running for charity with the pros. To me, and I know I'm in the minority here, but when I watched the World Championship Marathon when it was in Eugene, to me that was my picture of professional running. Okay, you got a couple hundred runners or less, and they're running a loop course and they're duking it out. And then you really can watch a race develop and you can actually see the race, The TV telecast of major marathons, it's just all over the place. You really can't enjoy it because they're trying to show you 10 things at once. They're trying to show you all the divisions and then they get off on all these tangents and they never really see the race. So
one thing is the people who do a lot of the telecasts, it's a good thing they bring in some knowledgeable people like Carol Goucher or Shalane Flanagan or Tony Revis.
They don't really allow them to,
I agree. Because they're trying to hype their sportscasters who cover baseball and football.
Yeah.
They don't know too much, but they're learning it, and some of them are runners. I've seen that at the Boston Marathon. I think in the end, I think our sport's going to keep growing and getting better, but I think a lot is hidden partly because of the doping issue and the power of the agents. And I hope that when they catch some of the dopers, they'll kick out some of the agents for those dopers.
So far, there's been no action to anybody, really. One or two coaches, maybe. I mean, Salazar got in trouble, but it wasn't for his, dealing with performance enhancement drugs. It was because he did some things that sexually inappropriate. But let's change the subject here a little bit.
It was at least partly because of his the allegations too.
Oh yeah, but his ban is the safe sport ban. But let's change the subject a little bit here. What non-Boston races were your favorites?
In marathons or just
in general? I mean, we've established that Boston was one of the top races for you, but what other races?
Well, I have a love-hate relationship with Boston.
Oh yeah.
I love the Falmouth Road Race. Every year I would train hard in the summer. Normally, when the school year ended or later, when the track season was over or whatever, then I would just train hard for 3 months and run a lot of races. In New England we have all these little road races where you could win, a case of beer or or a lamp that's shaped like a buoy, all kinds of little prizes, and we would just have fun. But those were good tests. You learn how to compete, but then Falmouth would be the first like serious race, and then going into the fall, whether I was running a marathon or cross country or maybe both, in the fall, it was the big test of fitness at the end of the summer. Because Falmouth kind of falls right in the mid-August. So you'd have 6 or 8 weeks of hard training and then go in there. And you'd be running against guys who were coming back from Europe, track runners. And you'd have, at one point, the depth of Falmouth was, there were something like close to 100 people that ran under 5 minutes per mile in the late 70s in the race. The results are out there if you want to check them out. But you would know in this top 100, you would know 99%. You would know pretty much every person. So Falmouth was right up there, top races.
You also won the Gate River Run. You dueled with Benji.
I did. Yeah, Benji and I duked it out there. Yeah, it was kind of accidental that I ended up racing there. I was down in Florida training with Tom Fleming and yourself. Some of the time when you were there, you were going back and forth between there and Arizona, I think. And so TF went to a race somewhere and you weren't around. So I said, the Jacksonville River runs this weekend. So I called the race director kind of, just days before the race. And he said, well, I can't do much for you. I'll give you a plane ticket, from Miami to Jacksonville. So he got me there.
Ways, though.
Yeah, it is. I wouldn't have driven. If he said he couldn't give me a plane ticket, I would have just said forget about it because I wasn't going to drive. I did have my car down there, but yeah, that would have been too much. Wow. So yeah, then kind of last minute, and I think they had a really good field, Benji, right? Rick Rojas.
I can't remember who else was there, but yeah, usually it had a good field.
Yeah, I remember. Some good runners there. Yeah.
Steve Foster was there, Malcolm East, Rick Rojas, Ken Meisner.
Yeah.
And on the women's side, Patty Dillon, I think.
I don't know if Patty was there that year.
Patty was second.
She was second.
A woman named Jennifer White, who I don't remember.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a story, Bob,
that was a big boost for me. Because Tom and I had just come back from Japan, from Ome, and I ran terrible over there. I finished 11th, and probably because I was getting beat up by Tom every day in training. We were running 15 miles every single morning. I pooped out on a few of them and had to walk home.
Bob, can you tell us the story about when Tom came back after you had won your trophy, first place at Gate?
You like this story. So at Gate River, I won this big trophy. In fact, you know where that trophy is now? It's not here in my little basement office here. It's out in the yard in the shed. I put it out there years ago and just forgot about it. And it's still there. But I won this pretty giant trophy. It's just made of plastic, I think. And I got back to the house where Tom and I were staying. And I put it up on the mantelpiece. And so every night before we went for a run, we'd go into that room and we'd just stretch out a little bit, do a few calisthenics. So Tom would just come back and we were just chatting. How'd you do in your race, Tom? Oh, yeah. He didn't ask me about my race. And then finally he said, oh, yeah, you went to Jacksonville. How'd it go? And I pointed at the trophy. He says, you won? Yeah. So we started out on our run, and by the time we hit the first block, he was already 100 yards ahead of me. And I was laughing so hard. But he took it to me that night. We probably ran 10 miles in 50 minutes or something.
Tom was one of the most competitive runners I ever met in my life. He loved running. He won New York twice. He was a great friend and a good guy. And his daughter, Margot, is an ultra distance runner. Because Tom's wife, Barbara, former wife who we met in South Africa, was an ultra runner, comrades and everything.
Yeah. But, of course, my whole point in going to Florida was to train for the Olympic trials, right? And Tom and I were down there watching the Winter Olympics every night. You know, we had this professor on sabbatical let us have use of his house. Kirk Pfeffer stopped there for a few weeks. Gunther Milke from Germany. So we had like people coming in, but TF and I were there pretty steady for about 4 or 5 weeks. And every night during the Winter Olympics, we had a lot of fun watching those. But we kind of knew that the boycott was coming. In fact, I had a bad run one day, and I came back and I told Tom, "That's it. I'm going home." I started packing up my car. I said, "What am I doing here? You know, it's a waste of time." And he talked me into staying. I didn't really want to leave. I was just in a bad mood because I had to walk home from my run because I was the heat in the wintertime. You know, I couldn't take it. It's like every day it would be 80, 90. We were going in some hot streak, and it was good weather to train in, but you know, you get worn out.
When the boycott was announced,
Yeah.
after the U.S. Olympic Committee fought for it, but
Yeah.
President Carter was struggling against contender Ronald Reagan, and American supporters, our corporate supporters of our Olympians, were kind of got a lot of pressure, and they had to let go. What did you and Tom say, and did you then drive home, or what
No,
happened?
I stayed. Tom convinced me that, you know, hey, you just get in shape for Boston. He said I'd rather win Boston than make the Olympic team, because that's how important Boston was to him. Of course, when you finish second a couple of times, it sort of gets on your nerves that you couldn't pull it off. But anyway, no, I stayed. I ran Boston. I hit the wall. Didn't run well. Benji ran.
Did you finish?
What's that?
My records show you didn't finish Boston that year.
I didn't. I dropped out at 20 miles. I dropped out at Lake Street about 21 miles. Yeah.
Where I usually drop out.
Yeah. I know it was a favorite dropout spot.
You're one of a few Americans who have won a major marathon in Japan, which we all know is a kind of
The only rarest major marathon I ever won. You guys have like dozens of wins. I got one.
I've got 11.
Yeah. Luckily, I got like 4 trophies for the one win, though, because in Japan, they go all in. Every prefecture that the race went through all had to give you a trophy.
It was called Beppu.
Beppu Marathon, yes. Still a going concern. It's not as big as, you know, a Tokyo or Fukuoka, of course, which almost went by the boards, but is back. But it's still considered, you know, it's one of the oldest races. And I think I'm the only foreigner to ever win it, non-Japanese to win it. But
I've seen video coverage on TV of that race.
It's all on YouTube. It's all in 1982. I put it on YouTube myself. I kind of screwed it up. You'll notice that. But anyway, it's kind of fun to watch. And there's nothing like winning a big race over in Japan. So, I mean, that would probably be, I mean, I met up with Benji recently at the trials in Eugene, and we did a couple of runs together. And Benji was asking me if I thought that Nike OTC, where I ran my PR, was my best marathon. And I said, no, I don't think so, because winning matters, you know. When you finish second, it doesn't, I mean, regardless of the fact that you ran a good time, it's not as important as the win, you know. And at Beppu, we were running a fast time, but we had a tailwind. We went out in 1:04:30 and came back in 1:11, but we were running into the same wind on the way back. So you can actually see it if you watch the video. There's some funny stuff in the video. It's kind of worth watching.
And you went to the New Balance factory after your win, and you
went to the New Balance factory. I think there's covered in my book. There's a picture of all the 4 or 5 trophies that they gave me. But at the New Balance factory, they took me there in like a limo, and it had little flags on it, with New Balance flags on it. And we get there, and all of the workers in the factory were lined up and they were applauding, and they gave me flowers, and I was standing there. I felt like an idiot, you know. I was like, okay, I won a marathon, big deal. Then we went in, we met all the top dogs in the company, and you know, we had our tea, and then I went for a run. The company sponsored a running group, so we went to the track and did a few laps with the company group, and no, it's nothing like, you just don't have that experience. I mean, maybe in other, you know, foreign countries, but you know, you don't have typical experience here in the U.S. You know,
I never saw anything like that other than Japan. I mean,
yeah,
I haven't been to as many countries as Billy and Ron,
yeah.
but yeah,
It's all on ceremony. And when they took me from Beppu, their factory was actually in Fukuoka, so we drove there, and they took me through all these mountains, and we stopped at all these. We stopped at a place where they make mochi, you know, and we went in. And it was, you know, they had these big wooden hammers, and they were making the mochi. And they sent me, after the race, they sent this huge box, and it had all of these gifts, all of my trophies, a big photo album with about 50 or 100 photos in it of all of the things that we did afterwards. Just incredible. And this guy at the race at Beppu gave me his card. He said, I'm going to make you a basket, because that region of Japan is famous for making these basket making. It took him a year. He made the basket. I got it right here. I'll show it to you. And they sent it in this ornate box, you know, with all the calligraphy on it. And of course, I put it on my kitchen table and threw, you know, overripe bananas in it and everything. Because it's probably be in a museum somewhere.
Maybe at the VAA. Huh.
This is the basket.
Oh, wow.
Can
Yeah.
you see it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What's it made of?
It's got some little
Is that
engravings.
cloisonate? Oh, no.
No,
I have
it's
to ask my Japanese friends to interpret that for me. I think it just says Beppu winner and stuff like that. But
Bob,
yeah,
that was a great victory, but also we have to let any listeners know you competed in what was, to me, and I think many of us who know the sport really well, pre so-called World Marathon Majors, the 6 that are given that title. But the Fukuoka International Marathon, won by Frank Shorter, Olympic gold and silver medalist, won that 4 times. You ran there and you had terrific races there too. Can you talk a little bit about,
sure, yeah,
like, if you got an invitation to Fukuoka, it was like an Olympic race.
yeah. Well, in 1980, my prize for finishing second in the OTC was a trip to Fukuoka. First American, that was your award, and then I couldn't go. I got injured, and I was told that I couldn't do it the next year. So basically, I didn't get a prize. But then 2 years later, I had the plan to go to Fukuoka, and I wasn't planning to run cross country, and I didn't run any cross country, or maybe 1 or 2 little races. But the New Balance team thought that they had a shot to beat AW in the national cross country. It was in the Meadowlands in New Jersey. They were just testing out the course for the World Cross Country coming up in a couple of years when it was at the Meadowlands. So they asked me to run, and I really didn't want to run, but I decided to run. I was thinking about Shorter, because I remember Shorter winning the national cross country and then going and winning Fukuoka too. But anyway, I don't think that was the best plan. I ran a great race at the cross country. I finished 9th. I was the first finisher for New Balance, and it was a really good field. That was Pat Porter's first win, and it was held on a Sunday for some reason, probably because it was in New York City and they didn't want to do it on a Saturday. So I ran in Fukuoka, 6 days later. And I went over there with Paul Cummings. Paul and I were pretty good friends for a while. And when he ran with New Balance and everything. And so he was a really great guy. And he had run maybe 1 or 2 marathons. And he was just testing the waters. He knew that's where the money was. And he had like 6 kids. So he was like wanted to go home with a check, But anyway, we traveled Fukuoka together, me and Paul Cummings. And
Didn't you finish top 3 at Fukuoka or
I
and
think you were
run?
fifth.
I finished fifth. I ran 2:11:52, but I was leading for a while. And anyway, it was like the last 2K. I got a cramp, and I pretty much hobbled in. You know, so it was a little disappointing. But honestly, after running the cross country, I got on a plane, and flew to Japan, and my legs were not, I mean, it was a tough cross country race. It was cold. I mean, they had these artificial hills, but it was it was a fast race because the hills were nothing, and you had a lot of fast runners. So we were just flying. So it was like an all-out sprint, and you know how tough cross country can be. That was one of my best cross country races. I did get a third in the national cross country in '79 when we won the team title.
Yeah.
But other than that, that was probably my best cross country race. But anyway, it worked out. I mean, I ran well. I finished fifth. I was the first American, and but sometimes you just think you can look back in your training and your racing, and you can see a few miscalculations that you probably made. But then you gotta take what you can get, right?
Yeah, and those are the days when we were all working jobs, part-time jobs or whatever, and
Yeah.
and going in like 3 days before the race. Today, the athletes would come in a week before a race,
Yeah.
and all covered. They're not working part-time jobs like we did and everything. So
One thing I learned was, and I know you guys probably experienced this too if you went to Japan, was they would try to have you go sightseeing. Every day they'd have you out there at 9 o'clock in the morning. Let's go here. Let's go there. Let's go for a tour of the course, which takes like 4 hours, right?
Yeah.
And there's no Japanese runners on this bus.
Yeah.
It's all the foreign runners, right? So I got to Fukuoka, and like I said, I was a little beat up from the race. So I said, that's it. I'm not doing anything. I don't want to offend my host. But, so I hid out in my room, and they kept coming to my room, and I was knocking on the door. Haji-san, come to course tour. Come to, whatever thing they were doing that day. And I just put my head under the covers and pretended I wasn't there.
it was an honor, and we've all been lucky enough, to travel internationally and represent the United States. So that's what you did, Ron, you did, Benji, you did, and
I think
good
you
luck.
mentioned representing the United States. I think when I first tuned in, I heard Ron talking about the uniform. Was that a race you didn't go to, Ron, because they didn't give you a uniform?
Yeah. So after the
You
fourth
got an
place,
invite. You got an invite through the AAU, right?
right?
Or the
Right.
TAC, and then what?
Yeah. So this was Benji. What was that? December, that
Yeah.
race.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they
So you got
reached
an
out
invite
to
to
me.
Fukuoka?
Sorry,
It was Fukuoka you were invited to?
I can't remember now which one it was.
Well,
I
yeah,
just
there was
said-
Fukuoka. The team was going to as our consolation race.
So you and Kyle went, and then you said Kirk went.
Kirk
He was,
Pfeffer was the other American.
Where did Kirk finish in the Olympic trials that year?
Yeah, he didn't. They just started looking. I don't believe Kirk actually ran the trials, but basically they went and started looking for people to invite.
Oh yeah, they just picked the fast runners for the year or something.
Yeah, and he ended up finishing 7th in 2:10:29.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
He beat Deke by a bit. Deke was 2:10:44.